Show, yeah. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Vedi Show. It's me, your host, Vedius. Welcome to the podcast where you can only find the most in-depth and creative and entertaining analysis that exists on the planet, which means that you should subscribe to make sure that you tune into all of the amazing content that is bound to come out in the near future. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the LPL. They have 3 representatives making their way to the World Championship in Invictus Gaming, Royal Never Give Up, or RNG, and Fun Plus Phoenix, or FPX. We're going to be looking at the playstyles, we're going to be looking at their strengths, we're going to be looking at their weaknesses, and yeah, we're just going to be talking about what I think about these 3 teams, and hopefully giving the viewers, whoever watches this show, some insight into what you can expect from these teams, whether we as Western audience should be afraid of them, what do we think of them, how do we think they'll do, blah blah blah. So before we get into that, just want to let people know that, as you may have already noticed, there's a pretty big gap between this one and the last one. A large part of that is because Worlds is super busy, so I can't really promise any schedule. The only way you're going to know when I release an episode is if you follow me on Twitter or if you are subscribed, because there's not going to be any consistent scheduling. I'm just going to basically make a video whenever I feel like it. These also take a really long time to make because of all the content I do. Now, I need people to know that I'm primarily basing my opinions on their most recent performances. I don't think it's unfair to form an opinion on their most recent games because I think that there is a large enough sample size for me to base those opinions. Normally, it's anywhere from 6 to 10 games, but for most of these teams, it was at least 8 games. But I just want people to know that the majority of my examples will be from the most recent series. And while regular season does hold an element of weight, and we'll talk about it a little bit, with regards to international competition, I find it way more valuable to just talk about their most recent performances, because that's what I think is the most important. Now, the other thing that I wanted to very quickly address was that some people were saying that I was cherry picking my examples and that I wasn't showcasing a good representation. So I very quickly wanted to show you what my notes look like. So, so this is my doc for the LPL. You can see LPL prep doc, and what you may notice is that there are 20 pages, and throughout the pages what I'll do is I'll write notes. So I have the notes for the game, I'll have draft notes, then I'll have games, and then you'll see the variety of links and examples that I have, and then I have closing thoughts. And then I usually try and create all these closing thoughts into the video, and then put it all together. So you can see that I have 20 pages of notes. This is why it takes so long to build these things. But the main point of why I'm showing you this is because I do only show you a few examples in my videos, but there are a lot. And usually I just try to pick the trends that I see to just showcase what I want to try and talk about. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the LPL teams. What you need to know about the LPL teams is that this region is really stacked full of talent. There is a massive player base, really, really big. And that just inherently means that there's going to be more players on average playing at a higher level. And given that they have so many teams and there are so many skilled players, what happens a lot in the LPL is there's a lot of team fighting, and there's a lot of high-level team fighting as well, which is why the region has a bit of a stereotype built around it in that LPL teams only know how to team fight. I don't think that's true. However, what is true is that this region is very good at team fighting, and you'll hear me repeat a lot, this team's biggest strength is their team fighting, this team's biggest strength is their team fighting, blah, blah, blah. And that's just because inherently in the LPL, a lot of teams are very, very good at team fighting. So to reinforce this, I wanted to show you an example between RNG and Top Esports. So Top Esports ended up finishing 3rd, 4th. I can't remember if there was a 3rd place match, I didn't watch it. But what I want to highlight here is, so RNG clearly have the advantage, right? They're sieging onto the base. And the first thing I want you to notice is how quickly Knight reacts to Ming. So bear in mind, look, Ming uses his ultimate, he does E, into flash, or it just uses his W rod. No, he does flash W, and Knight reacts to it without even using his flash, right? So that's the first thing. Then, because 4 members are zoned away and the Aurelia isn't there yet, RNG get the tower. Caster takes a lot of damage, but that's fine. Now this TP comes through, right? Meanwhile, Xiaohu has dived onto the backline to create this kind of 1 versus 4 situation while the rest of his team disengage. Notice how he almost solo kills Loken by himself. Props to Xiaohu. But also notice in this TP here that what Uzi's going to do is he's going to position in a way where he's going to put feathers just behind the ward, and so he's going to try and root whoever lands, and Lang X, or Lang G, I believe it's pronounced, is going to put himself in a position to then instantly stun, and they're going to kill whoever TP's in instantly. So the Aurelia, recognizing this, will literally immediately flash. So 369 recognizes the situation that he puts himself in. The moment the teleport comes through, Uzi pulls the feathers through as well. And he's able to get out, but obviously he loses his flash. Then what you'll see is the positioning of Knight to zone Xiaohu away, who now doesn't really offer a huge amount in the fight. And then notice here how 369 uses his ultimate to get on top of Uzi. He's now threatening the backline, forcing RNG to disengage. Caster doesn't want to allow the backline to get on top of Uzi, so he then ults here, along with the Renekton, to try and shut down Knight. They don't have the damage, and then at this point you're thinking, okay, this fight is pretty much won for RNG, but then Lang G, overcommits along with Ming, so they end up dying. Now, this is where you'll see Loken not miss a skill shot. So he lands Q onto Lang G, another Q onto Uzi, another Q onto Uzi. Knight is doing the same thing. And then you're like, okay, at this point, Knight can just clean up. Nope, that doesn't work. Xiaohu is going to pull, combined with the E with a good crit and heal. And you can just see, like, there's so much going on in these fights, right? And bear in mind that RNG at this point in the game had such, well, it was, you can see it's a little closer than I thought it was. But the main point is that the fighting in the LPL is, like, ridiculously high level. These players are really good, especially when it comes to these 5v5 situations, and I just think it's something that the whole world really needs to respect, that even if you have a lead over an LPL team, it only takes one team fight to swing the game back into their favor. So I hope that example was a good representation of what these guys can do. But that's like the LPL as a whole, and something that all these teams share in common, and something that you'll often hear me referencing a lot throughout this video. So we're going to start off with Invictus Gaming. For those that don't know, and for those that aren't familiar, Invictus Gaming are the current world champions. After beating KT Rolster last year Worlds in a best of 5, they pretty much stomped the rest of the tournament. They 3-0 G2, they 3-0'd Fnatic. Everyone thought that they were very strong. And they continue that dominance into Spring Split of this year, where they ended up winning their first domestic title. Bear in mind they won Worlds before they even won their own domestic title. And then they went into MSI, and in the group stage they finished 9-1. So you can see how Invictus Gaming looked very, very dominant. A lot of us were like, yeah, Invictus Gaming, scariest team. It's like the new age of League of Legends, where high mechanical skill combined with ridiculous aggression combined with clean execution is just the way to go forward. However, at MSI they ended up losing to Team Liquid. You can make a debate around how they lost to Team Liquid, but at the end of the day they did lose to TL. Then when they came back in Summer Split, they struggled a lot. They had a lot of internal issues. Rookie went home for some personal matters. He didn't play for like quite a few games with the team. A player named Forge came in. There were also reports of some issues with Ning and like a lot of internal issues within Invictus Gaming. And so a lot of things were going wrong. So they ended up finishing 9-6 during the regular season. The record doesn't sound too bad, but every team plays every other team in a single best of 3. And 9-6 just barely allowed IG to qualify for playoffs. Once they did, they ended up getting 0-3'd. They got obliterated. And the only reason why they were able to qualify for Worlds is because they went into the gauntlet, because of the points that they amassed from Spring and just barely making playoffs. And then they went to 5 games in both series. So a lot of people have very low expectations of Invictus Gaming because they think that the individual performances have dropped. They think that there is a lot going wrong internally with Invictus Gaming, and so expectations are not super high. So now that you're caught up, if you haven't followed along with Invictus Gaming so far this split or even this year, I hope that just gives you a rough summary of what this team looks like. But let's actually talk about how they currently play. And what you will notice if you watch any Invictus Gaming games is that they really like to fight. just period. They will just fight you whenever they see an opportunity, whether it be solo laning or team fighting or skirmishing or whatever it is. This team likes to fight. They are the stereotypical LPL team. It looks like that a lot of thought doesn't go into a lot of the execution and the reasons why they fight, but they do like to fight a lot. And so I have some examples prepared as per usual. I'm going to show you example numero uno, which is just JackeyLove and Balan. Oh, we just hit level 6. We can look for a fight in the 2v2. Let's go for it. Really nice outplay from JackeyLove. Good setup from Balan, punishing the support from JDG. And they're able to find 2 very quick kills. And funnily enough, you'll see this from JackeyLove and Balan a lot. And I mean really, really a lot. I have another example prepared, which is, this is in their series versus top. And what you'll notice is that this is game 1. Invictus Gaming, even though they were managed to sneak away a Baron, like they've been in a deficit for most of this game. And yeah, so what you'll notice here is that in this situation, they have the Sejuani in the bot lane. They're at a numbers disadvantage. And even though they have the Baron, they're like, yeah, no, we can fight this. They miss everything. They're going in 3 versus 5, yet they still choose to take this fight anyway. And just because they're really good players, they end up making it work. But notice that Rookie was dead at the start of this fight. Leanne wasn't there. And it was just like, yeah, we can make this fight happen. But that's pretty much Invictus Gaming in a nutshell. They really like to fight. They really like to get in your face. And yeah, they'll fight you a lot. So I understand that it might upset people to say that there's not a lot of thought that goes into some of their decisions, but I wanted to try and showcase an example that demonstrates this. So obviously, when I sit there and say like a team really doesn't think about when they're fighting, right? Yeah, that might come across as me calling the team stupid, right? Now, I don't think this team is stupid, but I do think that sometimes they don't always think things through. So this is game 5, Invictus Gaming versus JDG. I know because of the text you can't see super clearly, but notice that the game is pretty even in terms of gold, right? It's pretty even as you can see from the top. So note that the Shy's in the top lane. His TP is going to come up soon, right? Jarvan is in the bot lane, okay? So there's now 3 versus 2 in the mid lane. So far, everything looks fine, right? Okay, they go for a bit of a cheeky hurt. They have a numbers advantage. Drake is going to be spawning soon. If they find a pick here, maybe they can convert this into an easy objective. Imp's mana's pretty low. This doesn't look too bad for them. So you're like, okay, this is fine, Bear in mind, okay, Akali's TP is now back up and available, right? Now, at this point, all they want to do is after taking the Drake, they could just look to disengage, okay? Like, obviously, in this situation, maybe it's fine to fight. Maybe we want to commit to this. But, there's a bit of indecision right now. Now, instead, they try extremely hard to force the fight. Okay, bear in mind, the game is very even right now. Bear in mind, Rookie doesn't have flash. The Shy is zoned away from the fight. They commit here, and you think, okay, jungler just died. That's not good. We should probably disengage from this situation, right? But do they? No, of course not, because the Shy is still here. The Shy still has all of his abilities up, and the Shy is more than capable of turning what was a disastrous initial fight into a massive teamfight win for Invictus Gaming. And the reason why I wanted to demonstrate this fight initially was because you sit there and go, okay, a lot of the decisions that were initially made did not look super good. There was a lot of risk involved, but because of the high mechanical ceiling, they end up making it work. If we then immediately follow that up with their next play within the same game, remember, this is the same game, okay? So what you'll notice here is that they're sieging up onto mid lane. They've just lost their support. Baolan is dead. 5 versus 4. A couple of ultimates were used, admittedly, but still. Numbers advantage is heavily in favor of JDG. Yagao is roaming from bot lane into mid. He has the bot push. The Shy is roaming down. No flash available to him. No flash available on Rookie. You can hear my roommate using the lavatory in the background. And what you'll see is that in this situation, they can't fight. They shouldn't fight. It doesn't make sense to fight because they're at a numbers disadvantage. So what do? They engage, of course. Why wouldn't they engage? So Leanne immediately gets killed. And at this point, you're thinking, okay, they'll probably disengage now. Of course they don't. This is Invictus Gaming. So then they find another pick. They think that they can keep chasing this. And then the Shy ends up overcommitting. JackeyLove and Rookie, they end up overcommitting. And you're seeing how like this fight is surprisingly still very close. And Rookie even ends up getting another kill onto Yagao here. But but it's one of those things where like they could have just disengaged, they could have just backed up, but instead they chose to commit to the fight. Rookie walks away with a triple kill, and hey, Invictus Gaming, they have a gold advantage. Now, I'm not inherently trying to say that team fighting non-stop is a bad playstyle, right? You can make that decision up to yourself. But what I am saying is that what Invictus Gaming often do is they put themselves in situations where they kind of have to outplay their way out of it, and often they are capable of it, but not all the time. And so as a team, they are just very bloodthirsty, and they're always willing to fight you. It's just that it is, it's very risky, and you look at it and you're like, okay, does this fight really make sense? And sometimes you're not always convinced. Now, obviously, they do have the potential to snowball games extremely cleanly. Their game 3 against Top with Rookie on his Kiana was really clean. Super impressive game to watch from Invictus Gaming. And they're a team that often ends games very quickly. The problem is that they're just as likely to throw away these leads, which leads us nicely into our weaknesses of Invictus Gaming. So let's focus on their biggest weaknesses, which is the high variability of their playstyle. This team is driven by fighting and doesn't always think everything through, as we briefly talked about. So of course, I have another example prepared for you as I set this example up. What you'll notice here, as I jump into the clip, is that Invictus Gaming have pretty much stomped this game so far. So JackieLove is 4-0-1. JackieLove and Baolan have demolished bot lane. Like, they really they obliterated this 2 versus 2. Now, Leon did help a little bit, and we saw some roams from Rookie, but ultimately, like, what this game has been from IG is bot lane got an advantage, they got the bot plate, they moved top, they took the top tower, they controlled enemy topside vision, and you're like, this is going to be a clean AF stomp from Invictus Gaming. There's no way they could lose this game. What happens? Okay, this is what happens. So, you can see they're sieging onto this tower. Baolan comes in from the flank to threaten the dive. They're getting more plates off, and I want you to watch the Shy. Keep an eye on the Shy. The Shy. He decides that he wants to try and 1v1 Knight. Now, bear in mind, Top Esports, they have a Nocturne available to them. The Xayah is here and can come up from the bot side, and also, Top Esports have full vision control around this side of the map. So, for some reason, the Shy decides to pick a fight, and then he ends up losing his life. Now, the rest of Invictus Gaming, one of their inherent problems is that they believe in leaving no man behind. So they then commit to the fight themselves. So if we then speed this up a little bit, what you'll notice is rather than just go back to mid lane, remember, there are 5 members of Top Esports that are sitting here in this half of the map, and that means that they would have to take the long way round to get back to mid lane. They've just used a bunch of ultimates, they've just used TP, right? So like, the support doesn't even have his ultimate up, right? So all Invictus Gaming needs to do is go back to mid lane. They can probably take mid tower. Do they? No, of course not. This is Invictus Gaming. They want to try and fight. So they then turn back around. Knight gets the reset off, and then they start a fight. And what was a massive initial stomp from Invictus Gaming ends up being a lost fight. Top Esports is able to get a lot of shutdowns. They're able to buy a little bit more time, and they actually end up securing a lot of plates, a lot of golds, and I don't think they actually get this tower in the end. But yeah, you see my point. There's a lot of variation in the level at which this team performs, and they just have this need to fight all the time, and that is inherently a weakness that can be taken advantage of, as we saw in that example. And it's one of those things where Invictus Gaming can go from being the best team in the world in game 1 to the worst team in the world in game 2. And the funny thing is, you watch this game and you're like, oh, what are you doing, IG? Why are you making these decisions? Then you watch game 3 and Rookie has his Kiana performance, and then they snowball super cleanly. It's like one of the cleanest games they've had. And you're like, what? And that's what I mean by high variance, high variability. The caliber of players that show up on the day seem to vary. So like that's one, in my opinion, is one of their biggest issues. You have so much variation in the level of performance, and their overall bloodthirstiness means that they put themselves in situations that really, really hurt them. Now, this doesn't really this isn't just a single person problem. The variance is a result of different members performing at different levels. In that game, we saw we saw The Shy making a terrible decision, which ultimately hurt his team as they tried to follow up on it. We also have other clips from the other members. So to try and keep things fair, I also wanted to show a clip from Rookie. So I'm going to show you that one right now. As we jump over onto this one, you'll notice, just keep an eye on Rookie in this fight. So bear in mind, if we have a look at the state of the gold, Invictus Gaming, massive gold advantage, right? Versus top. I think it's the same game, right? Massive advantage. Really, really good. Okay. And then if we just keep an eye on Invictus Gaming, remember what I was saying about how they really want to fight? They could be pushing out their silence. Well, they don't need to push out their silence right now. So here we see The Shy. He gets one shot once again, right? So bear in mind, health disadvantage. They're just trying to force a fight down mid lane right now. Then Invictus Gaming get engaged on. No one dies. Best thing to do right now, reset, disengage, go back to base. What does Rookie do? He flashes in, misses everything, and then baits the rest of his team into then get killed. Right, so you can debate if this one was unfair of me. Maybe I'm being too unfair on Rookie. But, like, he doesn't need to make this play. Like, look at his teammates right now. What is Baolan and The Shy going to do? They're not in a position to follow this up. And even if he lands this, bear in mind, Loken has flash, heal, and ult. And he's putting himself in range of 3 other people who all have ult and flash up. So while he keeps himself alive, he just baits the backline into their death. So that was Rookie. We then, of course, have Baolan. Now, Baolan does some creative things, but I just thought this was the funniest one. Sometimes Baolan just does stuff like this. I don't really know why. There you go. Yeah, I don't know what he was doing. They lost a fight around Baron. The Baron is gone. Balan's like, I can stop this. I reckon I can stop. The Baron's gone. No worries. I can delay the base. So I think the logic here was that he was trying to buy time for his team to join. He didn't have ultimate. He didn't have flash, but he wanted to interrupt the backs because maybe they could kill a few people. It didn't end up working out. So that one was Balan. And then, of course, we have Lan, the newest addition to the squad. This is Lan where, again, we're looking at a situation where bot lane wants to try and push out. Imp and LV Mao have already started moving up towards Kanavi the jungler. And the problem here for Lan is he's just face-checking a brush with full information. I'm saying it's face-checking. He knows where the Olaf is because you can see the pings come down. Yeah, he face-checks into it anyway, assuming that he's fine to clear out a ward. What happens? Well, he ends up getting run down. And this is also another great example, actually, of just random team fights happening a lot for Invictus Gaming. So bear in mind, they've just lost their jungler. He doesn't have ult. The Shy then comes in. But then again, great play from the Shy and a good rotation from Jakulov actually allows them to turn this fight, an initial mistake, into a 2-for-2 overall. So, like, yeah. The high variance comes from multiple players. I would argue that the most consistent player of them all is Jakulov. Very rarely do you see him making actual mistakes. I feel like he has grown a lot compared to last year, and he is way more consistent than he used to be. I rate Jakulov very, very highly. But you can see that the point that I'm trying to make is that this isn't the performance that you see from every player all the time. Different players make these random mistakes in different games. And that's what causes this high variation. When everyone's on the same page, Invictus Gaming can look very clean. But because you have players that perform at varying levels from game to game, you have a very high variance team where their performance can vary pretty dramatically, depending on what champions they're playing, what the game is looking like, etc., etc. So I've obviously thrown some criticism towards Invictus Gaming. These are some of their biggest weaknesses. Let's actually talk about their strengths. And it should come as no surprise that the biggest and easiest strength is simply the caliber of these players, which sounds kind of counterintuitive to what I was saying before. And while it's true that we don't get the same consistency from these players that we did during the World Championship, excuse me, you know that the ceiling is there. And I didn't pick out a bunch of like highlight clips because, to be honest, there are already so many that exist. I do actually have one for some of the players, and I'll show you in a little bit. But the point is that a lot of these players still have an exceptionally high ceiling. Rookie in Game 3 versus Top single-handedly carried that game with fantastic roams, excellent use of the Kiana ultimate. Overall, he was playing extremely well. And you add that on top of the fact that Jakulov is performing very well. Seems to and shown a lot of growth, as we mentioned, means that in terms of just skill that exists on this roster, it is very high. So I wanted to showcase this skill ceiling that I was talking about. We already talked about it like earlier on when we showcased the fact that this team likes to fight. But if we have a look at this clip right now, you'll notice once again, game very close. Invictus Gaming versus Top Esports, game 2, very, very close between the two teams. Top have control over the Baron right now. And in this situation, this is the... initially look at Rookie, right? So they think they want to try and catch Knight off guard. So the wall is used in order to separate his team away from Knight. The wall is slightly mispositioned. So what ends up happening is Rookie goes in and they end up creating a 3 versus 5 situation with Jackilov locked outside of the team and then a teleport that isn't anywhere near the fight. So this is a 2 versus 4. They do kill Knight and then look at how the Shy and Jackilov are able to turn this fight back in their favor. Now, admittedly, at the very end of it, it ends up being a 4v5, which Top win because the Shy can't quite kill Loken. But the point still stands. You can just see in a 2 versus 4 what these players are actually capable of. And even though the Shy was at a deficit, they were able to make something out of nothing. So, yes, goddamn Shy. In any case. So one of their biggest strengths is that they do still have very talented players. And also, while their over-eagerness to fight is a weakness, it can also be a huge strength as well. And like, again, it might sound like I'm contradicting myself, and I do apologize for that, but it ties in with like the fact that this team is high variance, right? Because when they play at their peak, they look exceptionally good. But when they play at their trough, which to be honest, it's been happening a lot more this split because of the issues that they've been dealing with, they obviously look very poor. So what I mean by that is this team, because they always want to fight you and because they always look for opportunities to fight and because they take every fight that they can, you always have to be on your toes. You have to be ready to fight, you have to be ready to punish, and you have to be ready to react to whatever Invictus Gaming is trying to do. So I wanted to try and demonstrate this and kind of represent what I mean. In this game, game 4, Invictus Gaming versus Top Esports, what you'll notice as we jump over is that Top is at a huge advantage, right? They have 7k gold lead, they have the Baron buff, they're sieging down onto mid lane. Now, they don't have teleports on 369, so they're not really trying to play through sides, so they think that, hey, with the Zoe, we can just siege onto mid. But Rookie has snuck his way in from behind, and Lan is sitting on the flank. So they just kind of chip away at Top Esports, and then look what happens. You'll see the flank come in from Shy, the support from Top gets chunked out a little bit, and then, of course, they go in to commit for the fight. And ultimately, this is just Top making a couple of small mistakes, grouping up as 5, taking a little bit too much poke damage, and immediately Invictus Gaming are there for the fight. Now again, this fight ends up being very close because remember they're fighting from a massive gold deficit and Loken plays this pretty well, but it results in Rookie securing himself a quadra kill. The Baron is now gone, and considering the deficit they found themselves at, being able to find an ace is very good for Invictus Gaming. So like that's one example of Invictus Gaming like being able to find these fights, and like this is another one which is ultimately what won them their series and spot at Worlds. Notice here support from Top Esports. The reason why I'm not saying his name is because I'm really worried that I'm gonna murder it. So I'm really sorry. But notice here how the Alistair, like he's not inherently doing anything wrong, he's just slightly out of position. The rest of Top, you have the Kennen in base, resetting to join the rest of the team, most of the rest of the team is around here, but he's just slightly out of position. So what happens? He gets caught, everything's thrown on him, he dies. How do then Invictus Gaming convert this? They go straight to Baron, and they start it off. And this baits Top Esports into a fight where they're at a numbers disadvantage and they don't have one of their primary engage tools. And so it's things like this, that like this game was actually super even until this play happened, and then Invictus Gaming converted into a huge team fight win where they get the Baron and they qualify for Worlds. And so my point is that IG as a team are good at punishing very small mistakes because of their over-willingness to constantly fight you, constantly look for these opportunities. And I personally think that that is a strength that they have. But it's just not consistent, and it can be punished. So you have to play good, you have to make sure that you are aware of your positioning because of how eager they are to fight you. Yeah, so like the best way to describe it is IG is a very double-edged sword. They can either stab you or stab themselves, and a lot of the split they've stabbed themselves, admittedly, but they stabbed the opponent enough they're actually able to qualify for Worlds. Final and the last thing about Invictus Gaming is that if you watched both their best of fives, one of the to qualify for Worlds, one of the things was that impressed me was how they got better, like not only during the series but also between them. And how Leanne slowly became more integrated into the team as the series went on. I felt like they had early game plans that Leanne was actually getting better and better at executing. He stopped like thinking for himself and he just started working for and with the team. And I think that there's potential for this team to gradually get better over time as well. I think back to last Worlds where they only got cleaner the more through the tournament that they went. And I think that Invictus Gaming is scary because a lot of their issues came from, the internal stuff that happened during the regular season. And now that they've had a lot more time to just focus on this roster and work together more, I think that with good practice, they can actually become a much scarier team once again. And this is only their third seed. We haven't even talked about the other two good seeds yet. So I think IG has potential. I think it's fair to rate them lower because of how inconsistent and high variance they've looked. And I think that given that we know they will be playing against Team Liquid, and Team Liquid did beat them the last time they faced up against each other, I think in a best-of-1 format, it's important to recognize that this high aggression, high constant fighting, high skill ceiling playstyle of Invictus Gaming could be difficult for Team Liquid to deal with. Even if overall you don't necessarily have high expectations of IG. But I see them as a real dark horse. I think they can be very scary. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do at the World Championship. But yeah, that's Invictus Gaming. We still have 2 teams left to go through. So without further ado, I'm going to take an awkward drink of water. And no, I'm not going to edit it out. You can just sit here and watch me. Right, Royal Never Give Up. To give you a recap, if you haven't followed the LPL at all, they finished 3rd during the regular season. They looked pretty consistent and solid throughout the split. I believe their losses were to FPX, Invictus Gaming, and Top Esports. Those are the only 3 series that they lost. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I didn't get to watch all of their matches during the regular season, but I do have it on good authority that Xiaohu is actually a large part of the team's success. And while he didn't have the best playoff performance, a lot of people actually rate Xiaohu very highly and think that he's playing in form right now, largely because of how consistent and solid he was during the regular season. But more basing off their most recent performance, and it should come as no surprise to those that have seen RNG play and have followed RNG for a while, but they really are a bot-centric team in the early game. Even if their drafts don't necessarily suggest that they want to play towards bot lane, they usually do it anyway. Like Ezreal Tahm Kench. When you draft that lane, you're thinking to yourself, there's no way. Why would they play around a bot lane? Yet they do it anyway. And if you weren't convinced, I have prepared 3 different clips from 3 different games with Karsa actively just trying to gank bot, right? So, my body is doing weird things today. If we have a look at this clip, what you will notice is already Karsa on the Skarner. His path was Wolves into Raptors into red. And what's he doing? Where is he on the minimap right now? He's pathing towards bot side. He's working with his mid and support to invade enemy bot side jungle. And he's going to steal away this against an Elise. Right? And really this is part to do with top kind of messing up their draft. But this is example number 1. Then we jump over to example number 2. If we have a look at where Karsa is, so he's done a bit of a cheeky invade, again, towards the enemy bot side jungle. I see you're noticing a trend. Karsa, once again, ganks bot lane. So that's example number 2. Let's jump over to example number 3. Now in this one, what you'll notice is that Uzi and Ming just get a 2 versus 2 kill against FPX. But again, notice the Elise's pathing. Blue buff into what will be Krugs and red, so that the Elise is on the bot side of the map and can look to play through the mid and bot side. This is very common RNG. There are a lot of examples of RNG trying to set up plays through the bot side of the map. And there's no reason not to. This duo is playing exceptionally well right now. I think Uzi and Ming have showcased their ability in lane multiple times. I did find it quite funny that in game 2 of their semifinals, Casa went bot lane 3 times within like 8 minutes of gameplay. And as I said, I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm just trying to define how they play, and it's what you expect from them in almost every single game. And it's just how they play. They usually try to draft a pushing mid laner. Usually Xiaohu will play mages, but he's not exclusive to mages. You saw that he was playing the Renekton there. They just try to get a pushing mid, and with having pushing mid, they then have push mid, they then have push bot, and then they play for enemy jungle. That's their ideal setup. If they can't get that, then they use pressure mid to work with jungle to invade, or play through bot, or they use the pressure bot to work with mid in order to invade. And it's like, it happens so often and so consistently. It's like the game plan for RNG. The other thing to note about RNG's playstyle is that of the 3 teams that are going to the LPL, they are the slowest team, for lack of a better word, in the sense that they spend more time setting up around objectives before actually trying to fight. They are, of the 3, probably the most calculated in their approach. And they snowball games in a much more controlled manner, even if team fighting is still a core element of this team's identity. I considered them, just like when they played up against top, I considered it like brain versus brawn, because I think top just has a lot of talented players on it versus RNG that just have a much better sense of how to play the map. And RNG is just a lot more controlled and a lot more careful in their approach. But again, because in typical LPL fashion, they are not afraid to take fights. They will take them, and they will fight you. So with RNG, I decided to start with the strengths rather than the weaknesses. And as I said, they were more calculated, and I wanted to kind of showcase that with this Baron take that they did. So if we have a look at this play, if we start off, you'll notice that RNG do have an advantage right now. A lot of it has come from the bot lane. They were able to take bot tower. They've then mostly kept the bot lane in the mid part, in the mid lane to just soak up farm. And they've had Xiaohu on the side and Lang Ji pushing and catching bot wave. So what they've done right now is they've gained control over the river. They've pushed in top. They're going to catch mid wave, and as FPX look to invade on the river, you'll notice that FPX don't have any wards, they don't clear anything out, so they actually have to go back and catch all these waves. In this window, RNG, they didn't look for a fight, they're just clearing out all the vision, they're pushing out mid, they'll push out under the top wave, and then they'll start off the Baron. Now again, notice that they have full vision control, they have control wards, they have an extra control ward in their inventory, they know where Gimgoon is, they've just spotted him out, they know Crisp has just looked to reset, and this Baron is being done in complete fog of war. They zone them away, and then here, this is the most crucial part. Notice how Lang Ji takes a lot of damage, but RNG disengage. They don't overcommit to the fight, they don't try and force a play that they don't need to, summoner spells were not wasted or overly burnt. It was a clean, well-executed Baron that FPX didn't really have an answer for. So it was well done by them, and it just really illustrates, or it's one of the examples that I have that showcases that they are a lot more controlled and a little bit more cautious in their approach. And what I also liked about this play is that it wasn't like a perfect setup. Sometimes I think we see a lot of teams focus on their setups being optimal, and they tunnel too hard and making sure that it's perfect rather than good enough. And more often than not, good enough just works. And I think we saw there, they didn't have all this deep vision set up, they didn't have all of the waves pushed up to perfection, but they had enough vision to be able to control the Baron. They knew that FPX didn't have any vision to really contest, and they also knew where the enemy was. So given they understood their damage output and the fact that they could just turn and fight if they needed to, it was just a well-executed, good Baron. They're also really scary when their bot lane gets ahead. They move around the map very fluidly and effectively, and the team looks their strongest when they get to do what I highlighted earlier, create total control around the bot side and effectively snowball with their duo. It's really scary and difficult to deal with because of how good Uzi and Ming are and how often they don't make mistakes. So to try and represent this, I have obviously another example. So if we jump over to this one, you'll notice that top have just taken the Herald. They were a little bit faster on the play because they knew that Ming and Uzi were resetting. But then, of course, what Uzi and Ming will do is they will reset back out onto the map. They're actually going to path towards mid lane this time around, but they're going to gain a little bit more control over top side. And you'll notice how after taking this tower, they then group up mid. They know they have numbers advantage, and then they'll play towards this mid tower. And the main point of this is like, just wanted to highlight how they move this duo around the map, and Kasa plays around this duo and enables Uzi and Ming. And Jiahu is often put on a side lane, and he's just kind of like wave clear duty. And it's just something that you'll see a lot from the likes of RNG, where if they can, they want to play around their bot lane, leverage this bot lane, and snowball through this duo. So I know this example isn't the best one, but I think in my opinion, like, it highlights how much this team does rely on this duo, and also how much RNG will look to trade objectives rather than just try to force fights. And again, you'll notice here, they set up vision towards enemy top side, they're able to find a pick, and now they can look to play for the top tower if they wanted to. So yeah, that was the example with RNG. So that kind of covers a lot of RNG's strengths. Oh, I also had one more, which is that they're good at team fighting. I already showcased earlier in that top lane play like how intense their team fights can get. But I do have one more example, which is this one. Also highlights how good Jiahu is. So at this point, RNG have pretty much won the game. You can see how much more control of the map they have, even though the gold is very even. And what's cool about this play is how Jiahu sets up a really good flank to kind of set up this pincer movement, but he stays in fog. He waits, and then once they're in that choke point, he throws the ultimate down. RNG then use Caster's ultimate to zone them out. They secure the Herald, and then they just fight front to back. They use the terrain of the Jarvan wall to slowly chip away at them. They secured the Elder, and then they're able to just chase down their opposition. They don't overextend too much though, but they know that there's a wave top side, and then after finding that initial pick and forcing top back, they're able to walk away with the Infernal Trick. So yeah, I probably didn't need to show that. They're good at team fighting. That was one of them. There's a bunch of examples. This team is good at that. So let's talk a little bit about RNG's weaknesses. So even though they're very good at this playstyle, we have to be honest in that this is pretty much how they play every game, meaning that they're a bit of a straightforward team and they're a little one-dimensional. You know what you're going to get whenever you play against this team. And one method that FPX came up with for dealing with RNG was to draft a comp that would outscale and in the late game, and then could just match Casa in the early game. Because RNG slow the game down when they're not snowballing their bot lane, right? They can look very clean and fast and effective if they're able to get their bot lane ahead very quickly. And I mean, in that last clip, you saw what they did with the Sivir and how they like moved up through top lane and they were able to find a pick and they took all these objectives and blah, 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 blah. That's what they like to do when they get ahead, right? However, when they don't get ahead, they just kind of slow the game down. They trade objectives a lot. They still try to do that rather than try and force fights. They'll sit back, they'll farm, they'll be patient. But if you then draft a comp that just outscales them, then you can beat them at their own game. Because while they are good at team fighting, FPX is confident in their own team fighting as well. So what they did was that they drafted a jungler and they drafted a way in which they could outscale and could just match Caster in the early game. So here we see Caster once again pathing towards bot lane, level 5, looking for a gank, and notice how the Gragas is in a position to be able to counter. Doinb has teleport as well, which means that they can answer this play from RNG. Now, while this is not the best example, the main point here is, and Crisp also plays that extremely well, the main point here is that they're able to answer back and they find 2 kills for themselves in the early game. So RNG's typical play pattern of trying to play through bot lane ends up failing here in this game. And FPX have a composition that ultimately outscales. Karma plus Kai'Sa is devastating to deal with in the late game. The Gragas is going to offer way more value than the Elise is, and Gimgoon will outscale Aatrox on a side even if he doesn't have as much reliable teamfight value as this champion does. And Crisp is also on an engage. So because the main point of what I'm showing you here is that RNG is predictable in their approach to the game. They like to play around bot. They like to get a mage that can have pressure and push in the mid lane so that they can roam. We even saw Xiaohu roaming through here and look to try and play through bot. And he likes to work with casts whenever possible, and then Langji will save his teleport in order to TP down and join the fight if possible. But he's not able to do that because he's being pressured by Gimgoon. Tian was in a position to counter gank against Kasa, even if it was a little bit late, and the TP was available from Doinb to be able to capitalize as well. So the main point of that just showcases that because RNG is a predictable team, you can plan ways of dealing with it. And obviously that's easier said than done, because it also means that you need to be as good, if not better than RNG when it comes to late game team fights, and you need to make sure that you're actually able to match and control Caster in the early game so that he can't actually snowball leads. I understand that while some of you can make the argument that being predictable isn't necessarily a bad thing, which I agree with, the inherent problem is that it can limit you in your drafting as well. This team does not play around top lane. They just don't. Either because they can't or they don't like to. I don't know which one it is, I can't tell you, but because they don't and can't play through top lane, it does mean that their drafts will have to change, or they can hurt themselves in the draft. Like, if you draft Renekton Elise and then you're not playing through top lane, then that Renekton is just going to lose value later on, and you can shut that Renekton down. And that Elise may not have the same impact because you're too tunneled on focusing on the bot lane. So it's important to bear these things in mind because it can punish you and it can be difficult to deal with. Outside of that, though, I don't actually see many consistent issues from the side of RNG. So when I look for these strengths or weaknesses, like I showed you all my pages of notes, right? What I do when I'm making these videos is I will go through all my notes and I will look for reoccurring trends. And so everything I've talked about so far in this video is something that I've seen multiple times across multiple games. And then I will pick an example out of the many that I find and then be like, here is something that we'll often see this team do. And with regards to RNG, because they're rather one-dimensional, you don't see a huge amount of variation in their performance. If they don't get the bot lane ahead, then they will try and team fight you later on, which is like pretty typical, you know, but they don't show any other consistent weaknesses that I really see from this team. A lot of their players are pretty consistent in their level of performance. I don't think that any member in particular is like a huge weakness can be exploited outside of maybe Langji because he's left on an island and he doesn't get much support, so he gets dived almost every single game. But yeah, what I think is fascinating about RNG is I don't think they have a huge amount of weaknesses, or at least obvious ones. Like, they don't tunnel on objectives. They actually prefer to trade rather than to fight. Like, we even showcased there when FPX went bot lane with the Rift Herald, RNG went top lane. They took topside jungle and they looked to take mid and top tower. This is typically how RNG play. So they don't get baited into bad fights a lot. They don't tunnel too hard on objectives. If it's a bad fight, they just won't go for it. Like, they're very aware of when they can and cannot fight. And their players seem very well rounded, and they have a superstar in the form of Uzi. And so what I think about RNG is that they're just a very good team, but they are one-dimensional. And so the question, they're almost like they're like a benchmark that you have to cross. Because if you don't have good basics or fundamentals in League, RNG will beat you because they're smart as well. If you are not capable of team fighting at the highest level or like at a very high level, RNG will beat you because they have superstars like Uzi and Xiaohu performing on their roster. And so I think that if you want to be able to challenge at the top, then you have to be able to get over RNG, which is why I'm a little worried about Fnatic going up against them, because I think that the benchmark for RNG is actually very, very high. Man, that guy really, he uses the bathroom a lot. So I think overall RNG is quite good. There may have been some things that I've missed about RNG, because again, I haven't watched the entire regular season, but they seem really consistent in what we see from them. And I don't think that they have an inherently weak part that can be exploited outside of the fact that they are pretty rigid and one-dimensional in their style, and I think that their drafts could be hurt by the fact that they actually only play one way. So do I think that they're favourites to win the tournament? Probably not. But I do think that they can create some chaos, and they actually have a really good chance of making it far in this tournament. So that's RNG. Now we've got to talk about Fun plus Phoenix, one of the favorites to actually win the whole tournament. He's clearly been drinking a lot of water. Speaking of, awkward water break. That was a good awkward water break. We only got one team left, so let's talk a little bit about FPX. Fun plus Phoenix. A lot of Western fans probably never heard of them. Kind of came out of nowhere, but it's got a player on Doinb on it. The player on Doinb on it. A player named Doinb. He's been around for I think 4 years now, and he has not been able to claim a title. He's been considered a really good mid laner for a really long time. And the fact that he hasn't been able to get close really, has been a huge shame. I don't know a huge amount of the details about it, but I know that Frosk says that within the scene he's a much loved character, and a lot of people have high expectations, and a lot of people were happy to see him finally succeed and win his first split. But it's more than that, because FPX almost became the most winningest team ever in the LPL. They finished the season by only dropping a single series. They dropped a couple games here and there, but throughout the split they were very consistent. They smashed RNG in the finals 3-1, and they overall had a fantastic split. Expectations looked really high. During the regular season, they skirmished a lot. There was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of roaming, there was a lot of just early action. However, in the most recent performances, the skirmishing and the fighting and the killing actually slowed down a lot in the early games specifically. So there were fewer kills and fights between like the mid jungle specifically, and instead they prioritized them playing through bot. Now I think that during the regular season they often did play through their bot lane, and Gimgoon was kind of left on an island, very similar to how RNG approached the game. The key difference between RNG and FPX is that for RNG their jungler's focus is primarily playing through bot, whereas Tian, he directly works with his mid laner in order to make plays bot. And while he will gank bot a lot, it is specifically the duo of Doinb plus Tian, the synergy that they have between them, that makes them that much more different from RNG. Because whenever a gank happens, the two of them will roam and look to make plays. So, you know, as I said, I joked about how I think that they played a lot through bot, but I wanted to show you some of the clips that I had prepared, and it makes me laugh, right? So when we jump on over, you'll see FPX versus BLG. This is semi-final game 1, and notice on the minimap already that Tian, he has his top side maps available. He has his top side camps up. He's ignored them, pathing towards bot. Right? Look at all these control wards that BLG have in preparation of this roam. FPX don't care. Doinb is going to roam down to bot lane. He's going to catch that wave, immediately roam. He doesn't care. He's going to roam. They're also going to throw the Gangplank ultimate down there. And admittedly, the AD carry stays a little bit too long, but look, he doesn't need to be here, yet he's here anyway. Doinb throws his ultimate out, secures the kill. FPX find a kill on bot lane. Right? This is very typical FPX. This is what you'll see a lot from them, and also this is the kind of drafting that you'll often see from FPX as well. And this is where it's slightly different from RNG2, because they like to get mid laners that spike hard on like 1 or 2 items. They usually have like a safe side top laner. Gimgoon during playoffs played things like Gangplank and Mordekaiser. And then they try and get an early ganking jungler like Jarvan, Elise, Gragas are the ones that we normally see Tian play. And then they just look to play through whatever they can get on bot lane. They try to get strong side bot laners, so like they play a lot of Varus Tahm Kench. They also play Lucian Thresh. They'll play Lucian Nautilus. They'll play Kai'Sa Nautilus. Something that's easy to play through and something that can generate a lot of pressure that they can take advantage of, right? here is another example, and this one made me laugh when I first saw it, because remember that at this point, Doinb is level 6, okay? So watch once again, right? So the gank hasn't actually happened yet. Tian, he just kind of forces the play, he gets a bit of chip damage, but look at Doinb, look at him. He's roaming down immediately. He's not even level 7 yet, so he's behind Kuro, he's down in farm, he doesn't care. He's got level 6, he gets spotted, he roams anyway. Look at how hard he forces this play. This is what FPX like to do, and you'll see a lot of this roaming between the two of them, where they will, you know, it's not literally they group up and as a pair they roam down, but whenever Tian is there, you can expect that Doinb will be very quick to follow behind him. So that's a large part of how FPX like to play, but it's very much about FPX and their approach to the early game. This is what they like to do, and they're a little bit slow. They don't force ganks as hard as I would say RNG does in the early game, and specifically against RNG, I talked about how their strategy was match and control rather than like outpace. It was very much just like, okay, stop there, Casa. We're not going to let you play through bot lane. You can sit down and wait, and we'll give you a turn in just a little bit. So that's FPX's playstyle. Another thing that I actually thought was really cool about what FPX do is that sometimes when they fall behind, but when I originally wrote this, I said when they fall behind, but I watched a couple more clips and I actually just think they do it pretty regularly, is they'll collapse early from side lanes in order to try and force a fight. And what I mean by that is, let's bring up this clip, okay? So what you'll notice here, when I actually swip over, is that they often only push like a wave or two. So notice here, like Gangplank, he doesn't want to overextend because he has no control over the bot side of the map, right? Same on the top side, he doesn't want to overextend. But what they often do is they'll just push out a wave, okay? They'll push out a single wave and then they group up mid. And look at them, all 5 of them are here. TP, doesn't matter. They're grouped up mid. Why do they do this? Well, the reason why they do this is because the moment you have 5 people, it guarantees priority. Because they know that BLG is going to send members to side. They've already spotted them. So by grouping up, what you can do is you can force priority. This can give you access into the river, or it can just give you the mid push to help relieve some of the pressure, because you know that these guys are going to collapse and not just keep split pushing, right? And what FPX will do is they'll use this to try and force fights. They'll use this to say, hey, come TP, TP. And look, both of them TP in, and now they're grouped up. Now, admittedly, in this fight, FPX overforce, and they try a little bit too hard to make this fight happen. And this will tie in with their weaknesses a little bit later on, because this game was actually very close. But the reason why I like this, and I actually think it's quite smart, is because notice that BLG actually outscale in this game. Kuro's only going to get stronger, but it's going to get harder for Doinb to have impact. This guy is always going to be more stronger, is going to be harder to deal with in a side lane, which means Gimgoon's not going to be able to deal with him. So the longer this game goes, the harder it'll get for FPX. So instead, when they have, when they're at a point where they feel that they could fight, they force the fight in mid. And again, they overforce, they try a little bit too hard to make it happen, but at the end of the day, that mentality of, okay, we need to make something happen because this game is only going to get harder for us, I respect and I actually quite like a lot. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The point is, and the main point that I wanted to highlight with that replay, is that in terms of playstyle, this is something you'll see them do a lot. It is this early collapse where they won't push the waves all the way out, and then they force fights, right? Or they'll force priority is probably the more reliable way, because they don't always get fights. Sometimes they'll just use it to gain river control. Sometimes they'll do it to force the enemy to react to them, whatever it is. But it's something that you see a lot from FPX. The final thing is that this team likes to fight you, but it's different from IG. Because when IG tried to fight you, it's because there was a light breeze, and that was enough to encourage them to go for a fight. FPX is a little bit more aware and calculated in their approaches to taking team fights. And I wanted to show you this example. So what's cool about this example is that FPX have set up for the Drake. They're there first. They get to take it because they have push and bot, and you're like, okay, this is fine. BLG can't really respond to this play. But FPX go for the fight anyway. Remember, they don't need to at this point. Doinb is even basing, okay? They don't need to go for this fight. There's nothing worth fighting for anymore because the Drake is gone. Everything that FPX wanted has been taken. Yet, what they do is they force the fight anyway. Pantheon has the ultimate and he can land it on multiple members. They know that Nico is bot, so they can try and take advantage of this. And they actually convert this into a huge teamfight win for themselves. And if you look at the items, it actually kind of makes sense. Look at this. Kai'Sa, the LWX, has hit 2 items, level 12. Doinb has just completed a lethality item, so this Pantheon is pretty strong. Arguably, one of his strongest points in the game, only being level 13. Gimgoon has completed the Liandry's, and there's 2 completed items on Tian. So FPX is like, hey, we have our item spikes, we're ready to fight, and so we do. And this will tie in, I'll end up repeating this in the strengths, because I've jumped ahead of myself, but the main point is that FPX love to team fight, but when they team fight, it's because they believe that they're strong enough and they see an opportunity. And so this ties in with some of the strengths that they have that FPX have, but they're a lot more controlled in when they go for fights. They don't just pick fights for the sake of fighting. They fight you because they think that they are strong enough to win those fights. And I think that's really cool. It's like controlled aggression in a way. And what I want to highlight is there's like, what I saw a lot from FBX was they would force team fights that initially I'm like, why are they doing this? And then they would convert it into a lot. And that's going to tie in nicely, great transition, Vedius, with the strengths. So let's talk about strengths. This team is more than just the sum of its parts. Now, I personally do not think that this team has any particular superstar. Yeah, people are going to be like, oh, Doinb, Tian, they're so freaking talented. How can you all put them as superstars? Listen, they do great things, but I am not ready to put them on like an Uzi status, right? And you can sit there and you can debate if they're as good as Uzi or not. But the point is that when you think of like superstars on a roster, it's about perspective and like what they represent relative to their region. And as far as mid laners go, there are probably a lot of other mid laners that you would rate higher than Doinb. And I heard that Tian wasn't even rated the best jungler in the region, right? What's important to note is how this team all works together. Their teamwork is exceptional, and I find it amazing how well they all complement each other and how they work together and the synergy they just seem to have. It's like, for the Western audience, when we think of G2, one of the big strengths that we talk about is that they all get along and they're all best friends and they all like to play with each other and they work well together. And FPX is basically the same thing. While they might not be the best players in each of their respective roles, they just seem to complement each other and they just seem to have a synergy that allows them to be very good at what they do. Their ability to find fights may seem weird at first, but usually it makes sense and there's a good reason for them to actually start those fights. The fact that they're always able to recognize good opportunities to fight without the need for an optimal setup, I think is really cool. And the way they easily convert these fights into big objectives, it seems to be unparalleled in the LPL. You should see how quickly they balloon their goal leads. I don't have the stats on me, but they are just as good as G2 when it comes to being like a 1k advantage and then ballooning that to like a 5k gold advantage. And it's because they find fights like this one. So notice here how RNG gets a big pick onto Tian. He's going to lose 2/3 of his health. RNG think, okay, he's been forced back. We can look to siege onto this mid tower. We can get some chip damage. But look at what Crisp does. Crisp recognizes that he has control of a bot side because Gimgoon has set up the push and he can look for a flank. Gimgoon then starts to move away and Tian gets the command. Nope, we're not basing yet. We can fight here. So Crisp comes in and the TP is going to start coming in for Gimgoon immediately, right? So he's going to join in. Tian throws his ultimate down, so he's effectively done his job, and he's able to use a good Zhonya's to avoid that fight. And again, look, he still doesn't die, and look at what's happening on the other side of the fight. The TP comes in too late from Langjeet. LWX is cleaning up on the back line, Crisp is acting as the engage on the front line, and meanwhile Doinb is just providing support for everyone else. They then use this Baron and immediately use this team fight win and immediately convert it into a Baron. And being able to recognize that in the moment and go for fights like this is one of FPX's biggest strengths. The fact that their jungler just got chunked out, let's be honest, from a Western perspective, that would immediately put any of our Western teams off of fighting. Probably LCK teams as well, but not FPX. FPX says, we can go for this fight there's a really good opportunity to flank. We have TP and we have pressure on bots. We can make this play happen, and then they execute upon it very well. So that's one of the cool strengths of FPX, in just their ability to find these fights and execute upon them, and how they're always looking for these opportunities. And the one thing that I didn't highlight was their item spikes again, but this was the other thing. They knew that they were at the levels and items where they were in a position to fight. And these are the things that FPX often think about. Can we fight? Is this a good time to fight? Is there an opportunity to fight? And this is like the checklist that they go through in order to decide whether or not they're going to do something, and then they do it, and they often do it well. So the other big strength that they have is that they're really creative, just in general. When it comes to playing around objectives or moving around the map or starting fights, this team finds different ways to do things. And again, they remind me a lot of G2. So I have a really clear example of this. And for any Western fans or any G2 fans, you've probably seen a play like this before. So you'll notice here that BLG are starting off the Baron. Pardon me. What's important to note is that BLG's comp is very difficult to play in a team fight. Again, FPX will really struggle. Excuse me. FPX will really struggle against the likes of BLG because they have a massive range advantage and they can zone them super easily, which means it's very difficult to get onto the backline. That means that BLG want a full 5v5 fight around here. FPX don't care. They use the Rise ultimate to bring a bunch of minions down to mid lane, and they make the rush. Meanwhile, Crisp and Tian just come to cause interference. They're here to just interrupt everybody's day, make life as awkward as possible, and just delay these backs, while FPX run down onto the Nexus turret, end the game, and make their way to the finals. So it's a cool creative play like this, and we've seen G2 do plays like this as well, and this is also one of the big strengths that the player like Doinb has. Like, he's not afraid to take these gambles and think of different ways of approaching the game in order to help his team find success. I do have another example as well, because this team is really creative when they play around Barons as well. So like this one, FPX actually have a pretty big gold lead, and they are not setting up proper control. And this is also where I talk about how FPX are not a team that optimizes their setup. They could be looking to fully control enemy topside jungle, but instead they just try and sneak it with Doinb and Tian, and they use Crisp's ultimate to teleport to it and try and catch the enemy off guard. Then the Gangplank ultimate dissuades, and the irony is this actually starts off a fight, which FPX then immediately get to win off the back. Now, they don't convert it into a Baron, but it's these cool creative plays that we often see from FPX that are a large part of why they can be a difficult team to deal with. Because not only is there a lot of creativity in their drafting in the form of things like Pantheon mid, Kled mid is another one that comes out from Doinb, but their approach to the game is just full of creativity. They will find many different ways to attack you. They will not stick to convention. They're not the textbook step-by-step style of League of Legends team. They're much more about, hey, I think this is cool, let's do this. So, to summarize, I think their biggest strengths are their ability to constantly find good fights and their creativity in how they play out games. They're also smart and good at team fighting, along with having good players in every position. As we move into the weaknesses, I don't think there are any particular players that are drag them down, except for maybe one. So one of the big potential weaknesses of this team is Doinb. Now, I know a lot of people may get angry at me. I'm not calling Doinb a bad player, and I'm not saying that Doinb is a weakness that can be exposed per se. I just want to bring attention to some of the things about Doinb that you have to think about on an international stage. Because remember, I think he's only ever participated in one international tournament. I think it was an IEM. I'm not even entirely sure, but I have personally never seen Doinb on the international stage. Okay, and one of the things about Doinb is that he is weak in lane. He takes bad trades, his farming isn't great, even in winning matchups, he's not normally as dominant as you would typically expect. like, as far as laners go, he's not the strongest. And I don't think it's unfair of me to say that either. I'm sure many other analysts would rate other mid laners like Knight and maybe even Xiaohu higher, just in terms of laning for Doinb. And to support that, I was told that Doinb actually just stops in the middle of his wave to record summoner spell timers. Something that he doesn't even need to do, he does anyway for his team. And that's the thing about Doinb. He's a massive team player. But because of how he typically performs in lane, it is something that could potentially be attacked. Now, you've got to remember that this was one of the most winningest teams that the LPL has ever had. And if none of the LPL teams could exploit that, there's no guarantee the international teams could exploit that. But I do feel that other international teams put a lot more emphasis on mid-jungle synergy than perhaps the LPL teams do. Maybe it's unfair of me to say that because, again, a lot of my prep and focus has gone on these three teams. But to me, it feels that Doinb has never, or hasn't recently, been a point of attack, especially in the last two most recent series that I've seen. Whereas against the likes of SKT, he could very well be. A Clid and a Faker will look to shut down that lane as much as they can. So I'm not saying that this will cost FPX games. I'm not saying that I think Doinb is a weakness that's going to hurt FPX. I still think they're one of the favorites to win the whole tournament. I'm just trying to bring attention to the fact that his laning is not the strongest, and against different teams and different playstyles, that could be problematic. The other thing about Doinb is he doesn't usually draft towards conventional mid laners. I'm really happy that he's playing Ryze because I think Ryze is really good. I know that he's played Ryze for a really long time, but things like the Pantheon mid lane, I mean, Pantheon's super strong right now, so maybe that one doesn't apply, but things like Kled mid lane, Rumble mid lane, like, he's pretty creative. I've heard that he's even practicing Nocturne mid in solo queue. Like, this guy does not play conventional mid laners, which to a degree forces the draft to change and adapt. In the same way that RNG, the fact that they can't play through their top lane, ultimately hurts your draft, the same thing can be said for FPX and Doinb. Because he is not necessarily willing to play all of the meta things, this does mean that our FPX could be forced to ban them away, or they could even end up leaving them open. And maybe, just maybe, Doinb has special picks prepared to deal with these really strong picks, but it's difficult to say, and it's something that could be taken advantage of. So again, I really want to highlight that I'm not calling Doinb a bad player. I'm not saying that he's going to be the reason that FPX lose games. I just want to draw attention to the fact that there are two aspects of Doinb's playstyle that are things that on weaker teams would be criticized. And I just think that it's important to draw attention to these things because there is potential for it. Now, one of the reasons why I think it can be difficult to exploit Doinb is because of how well Tian compensates for some of the weaknesses that Doinb brings. Doinb and Tian work exceptionally well together, and during the regular season we saw a lot more of that than what we saw during the playoffs. And I think that if it weren't for Tian, then Doinb would not be where he is right now. And the fact that those two found each other and they're playing well together, again, it all ties in with how well this team just complements each other. They elevate one another to a higher level, to be LPL champions. And I think it's really important to note that Tian will not make it easy to exploit Doinb. I think he complements him very well in how he works with him and covers for him in many ways. So a lot of props needs to go to Tian for what he does to allow Doinb to play the way that he does without getting regularly punished. But wanted to mention that. I have no clips for that one. It was just a thing I wanted to talk about. The other main weakness of FPX is that we did talk about how they're always eager to fight. And I think this is a team that is very aware of their power spikes and will look to force fights when they feel strong. But sometimes they don't always think about the circumstances of their fight. So this is going to be the final clip, and I wanted to showcase this one. So here we see FPX, huge gold lead, they have the Baron, and they're pushing on all three lanes. Note that Doinb doesn't have teleport. And what's going to happen is a bit of a skirmish is going to break out in the bot lane. You'll also see that a bunch of BLG members are starting to group up, and there's a ward here that they're going to use to try and set up a TP flank. Now, what most teams would do in this situation is trade. So Doinb could either rotate down to mid. Doinb could rotate down to mid, and FPX could siege onto the mid tier 2 and then use Baron to even rush towards an inhibitor. And that would probably be the best play for them. But instead what they do is they use their ultimate to join in. They end up putting themselves into a 4v5 where the bot lane then gets immediately locked down, and it's easy pickings for Kuro onto the AD carry. And then the best thing is Doinb, he then also comes down. He doesn't try and trade it for a tower. He just comes down anyway, and he's like, we can turn this fight around. And to be fair, they're able to find a couple more kills, and Doinb does a great job in this situation of turning the fight around. Like, again, great team player. But I just thought it was an example of where FPX are not above just going for fights. They do have that LPL tendency of, if we can take a fight, we will. And again, like, you look at the gold lead, you look at the item advantage they have, it's not inherently wrong to challenge. And again, they even force ADD and Jinmo back, so they will still get this tower, so it's ultimately still a win for FPX. But you look at this situation and you're like, okay, I can see how FPX can get baited into these fights that aren't necessarily optimal for them. And it's something that we do see occasionally with FPX in that Azir game that I was showing you earlier about, where they use the Rise ult to TP down mid and like end the game against BLG. They also took a couple of early fights against them where they actually learnt in that game that they can't team fight because of the range difference. And sometimes I think that they tunnel a little too hard on, we as a unit are strong, but they don't always think about how strong their opposition is and the circumstances with which they're fighting versus the ones that you're fighting in. And sometimes it's better to trade rather than overcommit to the fight, which FPX do sometimes do. But outside of that, they're a pretty well-rounded team. They're pretty smart. They're able to play a wider variety of playstyles. While they do typically play through bot, there are games where they do actively play through mid. The Pantheon game that Doinb played, he hard camped top lane, and Gimgoon had a really hard carry performance on the Mordekaiser. So they are capable of playing a wide array of styles. It's just that Doinb loves to roam, and he's not that easy to stop either. You know that he's going to do it, and he's going to force that play anyway. And he doesn't care if he falls at a deficit because he believes in his teamfight value. And you definitely don't want to give him champions like Kiana because they can be really scary. So I think the main reason why they beat RNG is because they matched and were ready for the predictable playstyle of RNG, and they were able to out-teamfight them later into the game. So that kind of does it for all the teams. I think that the LPL representatives are actually all really strong this year. I genuinely think that they've sent 3 good teams, and there's a good chance that at least 2 of them will make the semifinals. It does depend on how practice goes coming into the tournament, but this region's mechanical prowess and team fighting is ridiculous. And I think that because a lot of Western fans are focusing in on the return of LCK, that they're kind of sleeping on the LPL. I had a lot of people being annoyed with me for rating RNG higher than Fnatic, but as I've talked through this, I hope that it highlights a little bit more of why, because like they have very good fundamentals, they play well as a team, and it's kind of the case where like IG is a bit more of a wild card where you're not really sure what you're going to get, but you can see the ceiling that they're capable of, whereas FPX and RNG, they showcase fantastic ability to team fight, they showcase strong mechanical players across the board, they showcase a wide array of styles, more specifically for FPX, less so for RNG. And honestly, they're just good teams, but it's mainly because of their great understanding of the basics, on top of the fact that they will punish you for the small mistakes that you do. And when we think about Western teams in particular, they don't play the cleanest League of Legends. They do get messy. And I think that's going to be difficult for them. I think that LPL should be considered very strong and scary, and I think that RNG can finish top of their group. I think FPX can also finish top of their group. And I think it's going to take some big overperformances to be able to upset them. So yeah, I may not have covered everything about the LPL teams. I hope that this was still insightful for you and you were able to learn a little bit more. I do apologize about the numerous awkward drinking throughout this series, but just for fun, I'm going to do it again. Water. Wonderful. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Group stages is going to be starting next week. Play-ins have been fun. I'm really excited to see some more teams play against each other very, very soon. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm not quite sure how often the Vedi Show will be coming out. I probably will not do many like this one, where I talk a lot like about a bunch of teams, because it takes a really long time to prep. And they're also really long videos, but I hope that they were at least insightful. I'm not going to do one for the LEC. I do have some ideas, but I just assume that the main fans that watch me are Western. So because of that, I feel less inclined, or European rather, I feel less inclined to cover the European teams because I feel like you know them. But I will make a short video because I do have some things that I want to say about them. I'm just not entirely sure, but I'll do it yet. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to end it now. I'm going to stop waffling. That's all the LPL teams. We should be pretty scared. I think they're very good. Yeah, and that's going to do it. Take care. Farewell. Make sure you subscribe, like, leave a comment. I've always wanted to say that. Bye.